Hi, I'm Caden here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On today's episode of Eating W's, we have our predictions for Week 3 of the 2024 NFL season. But before we jump into those predictions, just a quick update on Cal and I's head-to-head pick'em game. First little asterisk that I want to put by this is we had some scheduling conflicts tomorrow, so we are actually recording this on a Monday night right now, and the Monday night game is currently happening. So I did reflect in our scores, giving us both a win since we both picked the Eagles and the Eagles are favored, but they are actually currently losing. So if they do end up losing, I will just kind of mark our scores back down. We both picked the Eagles, so the point differential will be the same. We'll just each have one less point. But with all that being said, the scores from last week was me with 14 total points, which is a pretty damn good week, and Callan with 10 total points, which is certainly not too bad of a week either. The big differentials there being me picking the Vikings over the Niners, and I think one other head-to-head pick'em that I got correctly, and Callan not hitting his lock and me hitting his lock, and us both hitting our upsets, which is kind of crazy.
Yep.
That both of us hit our upsets, but one of us didn't hit our lock. But
Getting harder to pick the lock.
The early season stuff, it can bite you, no doubt. But yeah, so final scores for this week are tentative, but they are me with 24 and Callan with 20, finally putting me in a lead with that 4-point differential. But I think literally every year we've done this, I've charged out to a demanding lead and then lost by the end of the year. I don't know if I get loose and start picking too many upsets or what I do, but it seems like the same old vicious song and dance happens every year. So no lead is ever safe when I have it. But now moving on to our games to seeing if I can break that lead out even further. Starting with the Thursday night game, we have an AFC East divisional matchup with the New England Patriots heading down to New York. Over to New York. They are pretty much directly over.
I think
The New England Patriots heading, we'll say, over to New York to take on the Jets. And we start by agreeing we both have the Jets in this one. So I really do like the Patriots. We talked about it in our episode yesterday, but the Patriots are looking a lot better than anybody expected. But the Jets just have a lot of talent on that team. I think Aaron Rodgers, after missing all of last year, and I think, again, missing all of training camp this year for the Jets, is really starting to build some rapport. He made some really nice throws and overall plays to both Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, which are, of course, the big two playmakers on that Jets offense that he'll be throwing to. So as that connection just continues to establish and they really get into each other's heads the way a good elite wide receiver and quarterback combo should, I think that they start to become just borderline unstoppable as the year goes on. And I think that we see the Jets as a whole team with a very stellar defense and defensive-minded head coach in Robert Saleh just continue to get better and better as the year go on. So this is where I think that the Patriots kind of lose their underdog story and kind of slip a little bit in this divisional matchup, because it seems like divisional matchups are always really close or complete blowouts. It seems like there's never really much middle with divisional matchups. So will this one be closer a blowout? I couldn't say, but I do think nonetheless the Jets end up winning.
Yeah, and I like the Jets in this one, and I think this is one of the first times I've picked the Jets over the Patriots because Belichick's not there. Because Belichick had owned the Jets, and I had always said until the Jets beat Belichick, I'm going to pick against the Jets.
And Belichick retired.
Belichick retired before the Jets beat him. So I'm going to go with the Jets in this one because I think they finally get their revenge on the Patriots. I think that it's going to be a pretty low-scoring game. I expect the Jets defense to kind of overpower the Patriots offense because there's more talent on that Jets defense. Even though there is some nice pieces with like Ramondre Stevenson and Hunter Henry that are making an early impact on the Patriots offense. But I just think the Jets are going to be too fired up for this one and at their opportunity to finally beat the Patriots without Belichick. And then Aaron Rodgers did finally throw some touchdowns for the Jets, his first ones as a Jet. And they were to, one was to Braylon Allen.
Two were to Braylon Allen.
Both of them were?
3 total touchdowns for Rodgers, 1 to Breece Hall and 2 to Braylon Allen.
Yeah, I knew he had one.
All the
I
running
thought
backs.
it was the running back. So he's getting a nice connection with those running backs. So that'll be a big play to look for if he can get now a connection with those wide receivers and see if now how many points they'll be able to score against the Patriots. But like I said, I think this will be a low scoring game, maybe like a 13-6 or 10-7, kind of one of those games.
Yeah, they're 2 very good defensive teams. I could certainly see that as well. So now moving down the list a little bit to not only the Minnesota Vikings game, but also what we marked as our game of the week. We have the Houston Texans heading to Minneapolis to take on the Vikings, and we split here. Callan has the Texans, but I have the home team Vikings, of course, as I always do. Usually, in a situation like this, I'd be going in with very little confidence. If you would have asked me to predict week 3, Texans versus Vikings at the beginning of the year, I would have said, well, Texans are just going to stomp us, and I'll probably stop watching the game in sadness by the third quarter. But the Vikings are giving me a little bit of hope, which almost makes me more nervous than anything. But nonetheless, they're giving me a little bit of hope. Sam Darnold has looked really good so far. He looks like a quarterback who has a lot of talent and is finally getting his chance, just like we said he would, because he's finally getting a team that believes in him and some good players around him. And everybody on that team has been firing on all cylinders. It's really been a team effort. No one has outstood and been like this, I'm putting the team on my back and playing hero ball. But every single person I can think of right now has been contributing. They've been playing well. They've been playing consistently. And that's the sort of things that just gets you wins. I mean, I think it must have been 2 years ago when the Vikings were like 11-0 in one possession games. That's exactly how we did it then too, is no one was carrying the team. We weren't relying on this one guy every week. Everybody was going out there and playing well each and every week, which makes it really hard to beat a team when one person you can shut out, but then somebody else steps up and makes big plays. And then the next week you can shut that person out, but then this guy steps up and makes big plays all game. It makes it so hard to beat a team that does that. But one way to beat a team that does that is by also being a team that does that, which the Houston Texans very much are. A lot of talent on that roster. They can do the same thing as the Vikings, but instead of being a shocker with a bunch of no-names, a little more similar to what the Vikings are doing right now, they are less of a shocker because they are a star-studded cast across the board. So they are probably a little better on paper, but then the Vikings have a little more momentum and hope right now, and they got the home field advantage. Really even game right here. I don't know what the spread is. I don't know if you saw the betting lines, but I'd be interested to see the betting lines in this one. But nonetheless, of course, I'm sticking with the Vikings no matter what it is.
I think it's Houston 3.5.
That's a good one.
Right.
Yeah, I like that.
And that could change throughout the week too. They always fluctuate a little bit. But right now, I believe it's 3.5 for Houston. Because I picked all the favorites this week, except for my one upset. But I expect the Texans to win this one. I think this is going to be a very exciting game. C.J. Stroud is proving that he is continuing that success that from last season, and he's able to extend that into this season. And I do believe he has yet to throw an interception, which is the longest streak right now in the NFL at like 256 pass attempts. They showed it during the game last night.
I saw that same graphic.
So it's something like
I think it's 257 if my memory serves me right. But...
and that was before the game. So he added another few pass attempts onto that. But I think that not only is C.J. Stroud playing really well, but Nico Collins is showing that he is a beast of a wide receiver, throwing guys off of him as he caught a touchdown last night.
Yep.
And one other big player is Joe Mixon, who did leave with an injury, and I'm not sure where he's at. They haven't released any big updates on him. I think he just rolled his ankle, but
he got hip drop tackled big time, and they did not call it, but it was like textbook hip drop.
And that's one thing they're not calling. They're just not calling the hip drop tackles, which I don't get because that was the big thing this year.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think they're going to eventually, now next week, they're going to call all the tackles, and it's going to be way overblown. But
yeah, especially if Mixon misses this game, if that hip drop tackle leads to him missing a week or two, I think it's going to get cracked down on
Yep.
big time. Yeah.
But he was having a really nice game before that. So the running game tagging along with the strong passing game is working out really well. And on the defense, Will Anderson Jr. made a huge impact and was able to sack Caleb Williams twice last night and had a couple of tackles. So he made a big impact on defense and has proven once again that why he was Defensive Rookie of the Year last year. But I do expect the Texans to win this I think it's going to be a really close game. I think they could hit a late field goal to win this one.
Yeah, I could definitely see something like that. The Vikings secondary, specifically those corners, played really well against the San Francisco 49ers last week. I was a little nervous about that, but this is their real test.
Mm-hmm.
The Texans receiving corps is good. If they want to prove themselves as a good cornerback room, this is their test right here. But I think that Chicago has a really good secondary. The way they were kind of able to shut down the receiver room a little bit, Nico Collins still broke 100 with a touchdown, but outside of that, none of the receivers really did much for the Texans.
No, Bell didn't do much.
So that gives me a little.
Diggs had some catches, but they weren't big plays.
Agreed. Yeah, that gives me a little confidence for the Vikings secondary, what the Chicago Bears were able to do to them. So now moving on to the other NFC North team we always talk about. We have the Green Bay Packers hitting the road and heading down to Tennessee to take on the Titans. And we agree again. And Callan goes against his Packers 2 weeks in a row. We both have the Titans in this one.
I hope I'm wrong. I gotta say, this
yeah, you're wrong last time.
I hope I'm wrong on this, but as an analyst standpoint, looking at it, if I had realized how bad the Colts' run defense was, I probably would have switched my pick because I didn't realize how strong of a run game we had with Josh Jacobs. I'm not used to that. I mean, Aaron Jones was a nice running game, but this is a strong running game. And we've never really had a strong running game. We tried it with A.J. Dillon, but he was never able to really get it going. And Josh Jacobs, he got the tough yards. He was falling forward. He was making a loss into a positive, just those yards like that. And they add up. He had over 120 in the first half and ended up with over 150 because that defense finally figured out that we're just running the ball. We had only Malik Willis throw it 14 times. So I'm afraid that the defense with Jeffrey Simmons on the Titans is going to be a lot stronger on our running game, and it'll be a lot harder to run the way that we did last week. And that's why I feel like we're going to lose this one, is because it's going to be more on Malik Willis's shoulders, and they know how to beat Malik Willis. They drafted him. They scouted him. It's a Malik Willis revenge game, but I don't know if he's really ready for that, because he's going to have to go and beat the team that knows him best and knows his weaknesses and what to do to stop him. So I worry about that a lot, and I'm afraid that if that happens, that the Packers might lose this one early on, and this one might get away from them, and this could be a bad showing for Green Bay. But again, I hope I'm wrong. I just feel like the way the offense was ran, it was so vanilla,
one-dimensional.
Yes, that it's going to get figured out pretty easily, as obviously it did in the second half of our own game. The defense was able to keep up, and unless the defense is able to shut down the Titans wide receivers and really get Will Levis to turn the ball over and give Malik Willis a short field, I believe the Titans will win this one.
Yeah, that's the big X factor right there, is the Titans are not too good of a team either this year. They have not played that well.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see this being a little bit of a dumpster fire of a matchup. But you really hit the nail on the head right there. I mean, they became so one-dimensional and so run-heavy that the team was able to figure it out at halftime. So now that you have a whole week of film and a whole week to prepare for that, and a better run defense overall, like the Titans have a better run defense than the Colts, that's just a recipe for disaster for the Packers overall. I think that the Packers' best bet right now, looking at that Titans team, is to throw it on Malik Willis's shoulders and see what happens. I mean, if you try to do the same thing you did last week, I think you're going to lose. I don't see any way where they kind of get out of that with a win. So why not flip the script on them and just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks? I mean, hell, like I talked about in yesterday's episode, I kind of made the analogy to the Vikings last year with Josh Dobbs. You have nothing to lose right now. I mean, you're kind of playing with house money not in a good way. That's usually said in a good way, but it's more in a bad way where you're a wounded animal. I mean, no one expects anything from you right now. So if you can pick up a few wins and then still get your franchise quarterback back in 2-3 weeks, however long it takes Jordan Love to get back on the field, even if you lose those games, that's not the end of the world. So if you snag a win or two, go for it. So why not roll the dice and just throw it out there and see what happens?
The thing is, I think that if you tell Malik he's starting, he thinks about it too much. If he has to think about it, it's where he goes wrong. And he just has to make a quick decision, a snap decision. He said in the press conference that he didn't know he was starting until Saturday.
That's hilarious. They should do it again.
So exactly, and that's usually what they're doing. They're marking Jordan Love as questionable. Jordan Love's not practicing, but because he's not practicing, they don't have to put him as out or doubtful or questionable. Just one of those three, and they're using the questionable tag
That's
all the way up
hilarious.
until the week or the day of the game, and then they're being like, "Yeah, he's out," and then they get to tell Malik, "Oh, you're playing."
To be honest, I don't really see a scenario where the Titans lose this one other than if it's them shooting themselves in the foot, which could very easily happen. So I guess that is the one scenario I see.
If the Packers
But I mean-
defense is able to force a high number of turnovers,
I mean, like I said, I just literally thought of it on the fly as we were talking, but why not just see what Malik Willis can do in the passing game? It's just why not let him do him and just see what happens. But we'll see if that actually does happen or if they kind of stay with that vanilla offense. Like
it
Callan
seems like he was
described
throwing the spots,
it. Oh,
like
big
predetermined
time.
throws,
Big time.
and
Well, because like I said, there was a couple of them where they were really good throws, so they
they
ended
were
up
good throws.
where they ended up being good. But if they're not perfect throws, they're
Right,
pick sixes,
and that's what-
that's
that's
how
the
you know it's throwing
predetermined
to spots.
throws, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see if he can continue that success in week 2 of his starting. So now jumping down the list quite a bit to a game that very easily also could have been game of the week, and one that if it wasn't for the Vikings having such a good matchup, I'd probably be the most excited for this week. We have the Detroit Lions heading down to Arizona to take on the Cardinals at home. And we agree here. We both have the Arizona Cardinals, and Callan has them marked as his upset.
Yes, the Cardinals are flying high right now. They are in quite the run right now with Marvin Harrison Jr. showing up this week. The Cardinals remembered that they had drafted him after forgetting in week 1. But he had 2 huge touchdowns right away in the first quarter, or at least the first half. I can't remember if it was all in the first quarter or not, but
It was all in the first
it
quarter.
was all in the first quarter. That
He
was
had 4 catches for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first quarter, and then did not get another catch the rest of the
and then
game.
he was triple teamed. the rest of
Literally.
the game.
Yep.
Because I believe
100%.
Michael Wilson and Trey McBride took over.
They
from
all
there.
took over. Everyone but Marvin Harrison, which shows that they just had 3 guys on it the whole time.
So if you got to shut down Marvin Harrison, and he is definitely an X factor in the NFL. But because of that, I do like the Cardinals in this one. The Lions defense has kind of let some plays go, and they're not as they don't. Aiden Hutchinson is doing really well, but the cornerbacks and the safeties don't seem to be doing as well this year, at least early on. So I think that the Cardinals will be able to win this one. Actually, I would say wouldn't be surprised if it was pretty easily, because Jared Goff has not been playing very well early on. And he threw a couple of bad interceptions last week, and look for him to possibly turn the ball over again this week. And if he can't get the ball going and get in the end zone with Jamison Williams showing up as a big play threat in his 3rd year finally, and Amon-Ra St. Brown showing up, if they're not able to get in the end zone, then the Lions are in trouble. And that could be early on if they're able to shut down that passing game, because David Montgomery can't do it by himself, and Jahmyr Gibbs seems to be taking a step back. So the Lions are in trouble here, and I think the Cardinals' high-flying offense could shock them early, just like they did to the Rams.
Yeah, the Cardinals have found a niche in speed bagging teams. They
Mhm.
come out and they get big leads fast. I mean, you look at week 1 against a really good team in the Buffalo Bills. They started 17-0. They didn't end up losing that game, but like I said, in Buffalo against a really good team, that'll happen. They come out in their home opener against the Rams and they get up 21-0, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
So they come out and they score big and they score fast, and they kind of put all the pressure, they put everything on the other team to either curl up like the Rams did or fight back like the Bills did. And I don't know, the Lions just aren't used to playing from behind. All of their success comes from when the script is flipped, when they speed bag the teams and they get that 2-possession lead, and then they can just lean on their defense and running the timeout and just trying to get the game over as fast as possible. So it's a really interesting matchup when you look at that, because we could easily see the first half, if not the first quarter, pretty well decide this game. Because I mean, the Cardinals have a little bit more of the firepower to have to lean on the passing game and really have to come back that way. But I don't think the Lions are used to it enough to be able to do something like that. They have the grit, but I just don't know if they have the scheme and the firepower to come back from behind. So it'll be really interesting to watch the start of this game more than the ending of this game. But yeah, I was high on the Cardinals all off season. I've been talking about them for a month or two now and how much I really like this team. So it was awesome to see that really happen. Big step up player, hasn't even really been on the offense in my opinion, but actually on the defense. Dennis Gardeck, their edge rusher, with a sack trick, if I'm not mistaken, last week against Matthew Stafford and the Rams. So he's a big X factor there, and he's kind of like their version of Aiden Hutchinson, who also had a sack trick, if not, I think 4 or 5 sacks last week.
He had 4.5.
4.5. So that's kind of really cool matchup right there, because they're also very similar players overall, Dennis Gardeck and Aiden Hutchinson are. So really overall pretty similar teams, not scheme-wise, but performance-wise and play-wise, I should say. So yeah, like I said, Vikings have a really fun matchup. So of course that's the game I'm most excited for. But other than that, this is the game of the week, really. It could easily be game of the year candidate, really. We'll see if it actually plays out that way, but it's going to be a fun one to watch. So now moving on, we have our primetime games, starting with Sunday Night Football of the Kansas City Chiefs, heading down to Atlanta to take on the Falcons. And we agree here, and I actually have the Kansas City Chiefs as my lock. I thought the Falcons looked very poor in week 1. As I said, we're recording this on a Monday, and they are actually currently playing. And when we did just check before starting this episode, they had the lead against the Philadelphia Eagles. So maybe they're playing a little better this week. I'll have to kind of check them out and reevaluate that. But even if they are playing better this week, I don't think that changes much. I think I'd still have Kansas City, and I'd probably still have them as my lock. The Kansas City Chiefs are just a really good team right now, and they are really hard to beat. If you give them any opportunity, they're going to seize it. They're going to sneak up on you, whether it's getting ahead and just making it so unbearable and so unable for you to come back, or you make a mistake and let them get back in a game and they stage a comeback on you. They can really play it both ways and have shown so much success doing it in either way, either direction you want to look at it. So I think that the Falcons are going to make those mistakes. In week 1, Kirk Cousins made a lot of those mistakes that let teams get back in the game or let the game get out of hand for you. So I can see him making 1 or 2 of those mistakes in this game, and the Chiefs just never looking back.
Yeah, I like the Chiefs in this one because of Patrick Mahomes. I mean, he had his worst game, one of the worst games of his career last week, and they still were able to pull out the win. So that just shows how complete of a team they are, with the wide receivers showing up, the running game, the blocking game. They're all performing very well. They have very good players at every level, on the defensive side and the offensive side. They're just tough to beat. And even when Patrick Mahomes throws 2 interceptions, you got to capitalize on that, and you have to get touchdowns off of that, and you have to put them away. You have to score touchdowns to beat them. And the Bengals had to settle for too many field goals, and that's what happens, is that field goals don't put them away. And I think the Chiefs are going to be able to put away the Falcons early on, because I just don't think that the Falcons defense is going to be able to keep up with the Chiefs offense. I think Mahomes has a bounce back game and kind of has an opposite, one of the better games of his career, just because that seems to be how things go. You do one end of the spectrum, you hit the other the next week. So I expect Mahomes to actually perform very well next week on Sunday night, and look for him to be the MVP of the game.
Yeah, take out some anger. That's what it is. It's just letting everything out, all your frustration from last week. So now moving on to one of two Monday Night Football games, just like they did often last year. There's going to be two Monday Night Football games this week, one on ABC and one on the usual scheduled ESPN. But starting with the AFC matchup of the Jacksonville Jaguars heading to Buffalo to take on the Bills. And we agree again, we both have the Bills in this one. Just touched on it a little bit ago. The Bills are a very good team overall, but an even better team at home. They got that great stadium and that great aura there with the Bills Mafia. And the Jacksonville Jaguars are a team heading in the wrong direction, to say the least. Trevor Lawrence looked very bad last week. They stormed out to a commanding lead in week 1, but then absolutely fell apart and were shut out in the second half of their week 1 matchup against the Dolphins. They were all but shut down in their matchup against the Cleveland Browns. They let Myles Garrett start to take over towards the end of the game, which as soon as you start letting that happen, you are just toast. There's no chance right there. So I think that the Jags, I'm not going to say they're a bad team yet, but I think I'll just stick with what I said. I think I said it perfectly. They're just heading in the wrong direction right now. It's not looking promising for them. And the Bills are the opposite. The Bills had probably some of the most question marks they had heading into this season that they've had in the past 2-3 years. But they have not only answered those question marks, but they have absolutely dominated those question marks. I mean, Josh Allen is still playing hero ball. Guys like Keon Coleman and especially Khalil Shakir, more than anybody, have been stepping up in the presence of a elite wide receiver like they lost in Stephon Diggs. So overall, this Bills team is just good, and I don't see the Jags really having much of a chance at all, in dead honesty.
No, the Jaguars, they really are struggling right now. ETN has taken a step back and has really struggled in the running game. Trevor Lawrence just doesn't have any connection with his wide receivers. Christian Kirk only had 1 catch for 1 yard. I mean, when that happens, how do you not get your number 1 receiver more involved? I'm not sure how many targets he had, so maybe he was more involved and it just wasn't connecting. But either way, it doesn't look good. So it's not good for the Jaguars right now, who even defensively, even with a strong pass rush and a nice defensive room, are still allowing a lot of points to the opposing team. And when you can't score enough points to keep up, it doesn't matter how many points you allow or don't allow, because your offense can't score any to match them. And right now, the Jaguars are struggling to score points. And because of that, I think the Bills win this one pretty easily. Josh Allen has not only shown that he has the ability to play his hero ball, but he has a strong supporting cast with not only the wide receivers stepping up, but James Cook who had 3 huge touchdowns last Thursday against the Dolphins and was able to put them away early on. And it's kind of a shocking matchup. And so look for James Cook to kind of continue his success and be a big X factor in this one and be the reason that the Bills win this one again.
Yeah. Brian Thomas Jr. has been playing really well. If you're a Jags fan, there's your silver lining of the season so far. But that's about
be your number 1 yet.
That's about your one silver lining right now, because everything else, it has not been looking too hot in Jacksonville. So now moving on to our final game of this week. In the second Monday night game, we have an out-of-conference matchup with the Washington Commanders heading to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. And we finish this week by disagreeing. Callan has the Bengals in this one, but I have the Commanders. I thought that the Commanders looked pretty good last week, which is silly to say for a team that won by kicking 7 field goals. But hell, if you find a way to win, you take the one in that win column. There's no doubt about that. But Jaden Daniels kind of looked like he's starting to get a little more comfortable. He built a little bit more rapport with Terry McLaurin, which if they want any sustained success in the long run, they're going to need a connection between Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin, to say the least. That's the big thing that they need to continue to grow right now. But more than the Commanders winning this game, I think that the Bengals kind of go down with Jacksonville and start kind of heading in the wrong direction here. I mean, they looked really poor week 1, and then they played their heart out week 2, but still end up losing. I feel like you kind of stumble and you reel from that a little bit. When you play so hard and you still lose the game, if you watch Joe Burrow when he does like the handshakes and everything after the game, you can see it in his face that, I mean, of course, more than anything, he's just mad because you're mad when you lose, but he kind of just looked defeated too. It was not a good look. And I very shortly touched on it in yesterday's episode. But I think that Joe Burrow is one of the more overrated quarterbacks in the league right now. I'm not saying that people just like think he's good and he's bad, like he's way down here. I'm more saying that he's decent, like he's okay, maybe to good, and people think he's just way up here. And so when I say overrated, I'm not saying he's bad. I'm just saying he's not this messiah that a lot of people seem to think he is. But here's his chance to prove me wrong, because he's going against a defense that has allowed a lot of points to both of their first two opponents this week, or this year rather. So if he gets shut down by the Commanders defense, then you really know things are starting to go wrong. But if they can have a bounce back game and he puts up 300 yards and 4 touchdowns, then I'll put a sock in it. I'll eat my words. But for now, I have the Commies.
Well, I like the Bengals in this one. I just think they're the more talented team than the Commanders. Joe Burrow, I think, will do enough to get the ball into the end zone and get the points that the Bengals need to win this game. Obviously, the Commanders are struggling to score touchdowns right now with the 7 field goals, which I don't think that the field goals will be enough to beat the Bengals. The Commanders will have to get in the end zone, but I think that the Bengals are just going to be able to put up too many points because they're going to be angry from their Chiefs loss, where they kind of let that one slip away. And I think they kind of turn it around here and get back on track, because that's the way it's been the last couple of years. It's taken them a few games to kind of get rolling and get their chemistry down. T. Higgins is expected back this week, which will make a big impact. And we can see if Andre Yoshisavis is able to continue his success. And if so, if he's able to continue his success when T. Higgins comes back, look out, because this offense has been explosive before, and it can be explosive again.
Yeah, certainly. This is Burrow's prove it week. I mean, the season has not started how he or any Burrow fans or Cincinnati fans have thought it should start. So it's your get right week to absolutely stomp a lesser team. So if they let him stay in the game, or especially if they play poorly and let him win, that is not a good sign for the Cincinnati Bengals.
No.
But thank you all so much for watching this episode and our predictions for week 3 of the 2024 NFL season. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like or subscribe. But until next week, don't forget
to eat the W.